Today we look at some of the configuration first steps for new Tanium customers. Welcome back to Tanium Tech Talks. I'm your host, Ashley McGlone. Whether you're a first-time customer of Tanium or maybe a seasoned admin training your team, there are some basic rudiments of configuring your environment that may not seem so basic without proper context. So today, we want to demo what it takes to make Tanium your own. And we're going to specifically walk through creating your own content and delegating it to a specific group of users, in this case, the help desk. And this involves custom content, RBAC, single endpoint view, and more. So, of course, before we do any of this, we've already planned and documented the requirements and the naming conventions, right? All that paperwork we usually try to avoid, right? But you got to have a plan, right? Know exactly what people need before you start granting access to things. But then that's where we pick up with today's steps, the actual walkthrough in the console. Now, it's always a treat when we have a customer join the show, and today Matthew is going to walk us through the console. So Matthew, welcome for your first time on the show. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Matthew. I'm a huge fan of Tanium Tech Talk. I think I've seen almost every episode out there so far. I've watched them numerous times. It's what I do in my spare time. Even my 2-year-old knows who Ashley is, and my whole family does. So it's good to be on the show. I'm really excited to be here. Met Ashley at Converge along with some other individuals from Tech Talks, notable, very intelligent people, some of the smartest guys I've ever met. But yeah, I would love to share my experience with Tanium and how I can help new clients and new individuals coming in Tanium kind of maximize their ability to move forward expeditiously. So.
Yeah, and you have a Tanium certification or two, right?
Yeah, I do. I'm a Tanium certified operator and Tanium certified administrator. I'm happy to be here.
So today we're going to walk through some of those first steps that you took as a customer, and outside of, once all the other paperwork's done and you log into the Tanium console for the first time and you've already had a proof of concept typically or a proof of value, got to play a little bit, but then you got to make it your own, right? So today we want to look at the use case of, hey, we've got the service desk or the help desk, and you need to give them some custom sensors and packages and a view for them to help accelerate their ticket closures. And typically what I tell folks is, hey, just grab the top 5, top 10 tickets that are able to be automated, throw those in Tanium, and life is good. So where should we start on this journey, Matthew?
I would say largely administrators forget where we come from, the service desk, and I put a large amount of time into their roles and packages for their success. It's not just for me. It's not just about them getting tickets closed. I mean, for upper management, yeah, it is. And for our SLAs, yeah. But it's really so they can learn and like kind of designing things so they understand exactly what we're doing and why we're doing it. So it's funny that you mentioned, after all the paperwork's done, Tanium, actually, I was in charge at one position of collecting the audit data for the SVRS checklist, which is if you know NIST 800-171, Tanium covers multiple controls, above 40 of them. I can't speak for, I didn't have access to all the modules they offer, but I can say that I managed almost 50 of the 110 for revision 2. So with that being said, yeah, let's jump into the RBAC for the service test. The first thing you need to know about Tanium is what makes it different and what makes it the most advanced thing out there is the ability to ask questions in real time and get that data back in real time and have your endpoint management system in the cloud react to it. I guess the thing that I would have wished I knew when I started with Tanium is if you need to open a new tab in Tanium, duplicate it. That is your bread and butter. Okay, so under administration is where you're going to do a lot of this configuring for RBAC, content sets, packages, all that good stuff. So content set. So actually, I think you have like 3 or 4 RBAC videos at the current time regarding like how to configure the role, what the content set is, and I think that they did a pretty good job explaining that.
That was Cat Ale on
Yeah,
the part one of the RBAC episode, and we'll have all these extra episodes linked below for you as we go along today. There's several of them that you can follow up for more detail, but basically, she said it was like a folder that you can just drop Tanium stuff into and then delegate permission for it.
all right, so this is the content set we created for the service desk. Now, if you can click into the content sets, right, and you can see what's in what's typically you can see what's in them. Here are the sensors that we've assigned under the service desk content set. So you're going to have your sensors in there in your content sets. You're going to have your packages in your content set. You're going to even have the dashboards. Essentially, almost everything pertaining to aspects of Tanium with respect to the modules themselves. Whatever the modules are using are going to be in those content sets. And each module actually typically has a content set associated with it that you're going to be able to copy and clone content into these RBAC roles.
Now, I want to look here. We got endpoint location. We're going to come back to that later in our demo. And then if we scroll down to packages, what do we have down there for packages to pick from that are already in this content set? Yeah, so we've got some different ones there, like deploy LOB, line of business application, right? Organizational information. So we've got some packages. So again, playing to that example, service desk, you've predefined already some scripts that you put into packages to resolve top tickets, some pieces of special information you might need that we got in the sensors. So we're all set here with the content set for the service desk.
Yeah, there's a lot of information that could have helped when I first started. So I just came off the most applicable ones. I think the biggest hurdles I think orgs face when I made these packages. So let's if it's okay with you, let's move on to the roles. The role would be the actual RBAC itself. Well, what we would consider RBAC. RBAC stands for role-based access control, but RBAC is the short term for the industry. So when you're configuring a role, there's two different types. There's the allow and the deny role, right? All your custom roles are going to be under this category custom tab right here. And as you can see, we have the service desk role right here. It's limited, very limited permissions. And I can actually just run through and show you a brief example of it. So again, we can do this example one. We're not going to use this example one after this, but just to give you an idea of how limited you can get it. So the interact module, you want to give this service desk, or at a minimum, you want to give individuals the ability to ask dynamic questions because that's what makes Tanium Tanium. The second, you're going to want to allow EIDs to be resolved for endpoints. That's a very different conversation and all this stuff. We can get really in depth, but I think it's better left to the professionals of Tanium like Kat and Ashley. So we're going to give it the most minimum we can, and I'm going to hit save here in just a moment. What this does is it provides the ability to ask the question, look at the endpoint, single endpoint view, but also the deploy action.
And that interact show, I just want to point that out there. That's a big one because sometimes if you skip that by mistake, maybe you've given them interact permissions, but they don't have the ability to actually see the interface. So interact show is a big one.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
And the same thing, this data under data. If these permissions are not configured correctly, you're not going to see this single endpoint view right here. And that's kind of important because that's another thing that makes Tanium Tanium, especially for roles like the service desk. So we're going to go ahead and we want to not give that role to configure reporting groups because that's going to allow them to modify settings under reporting. Same thing with collection and registration up here with interact. We're going to speed off that. Read is okay. You want to not let, steer away from the service desk being able to enable things in TDS. So lastly is going to be action deployment. You can limit it to just the single endpoint view page, but again, that is a larger, more limited RBAC that is better handled by the support team or, professionals of Tanium. But it is possible. And then for the last one, read package. And then we can assign that content set, the example one, and then we can move on to the next one. But we're not going to create this role though.
Now let's actually look at the
Oh,
role
okay.
called service desk because I want them to see when you did that special little move there of applying the content sets.
Mhm.
That's really important for
Oh
folks to
yeah.
understand.
Yeah,
Yeah,
let's go back to that. That's good point.
yeah.
As you can see here, example, right? When I did that, what happened was everything that was down here that was checked with a one, what that did is when I applied that, it applied it. So if I go down here and I do and I hit service desk and then I hit example, you'll see that there's only two. So now they only have access to those two content sets. And for this is another one to note. So reporting, that's going to be required for the, if you want the service desk to have access to what is already configured under the single endpoint view here, right? So if you want them to be able to see this, I typically don't have an issue with it because it's a read access, it's not configure access. You would just add that reporting in. So yeah, you could do it like that. If you really wanted to limit it, you would just do everything strictly based on their content set. So they wouldn't really see anything here except for this part right here. So any questions?
So to recap so far, we've got a content set that's got some custom sensors and packages assigned to it. Then in order to grant access to that, you created a role and you pick some special things. We'll have, if you're watching the video, just go back and kind of watch for some of those things that he picked specifically, but that's going to grant access to those things for our service desk coming up. Yeah. So how do I then experience that? If I log in as a help desk user, how does it know to give me that view?
Oh, sure. So there's a couple different ways you can configure it in your environment depending on how your administrator. Typically, it would be your default persona if you're on the service desk, right? But in this case, it's going to be one of my personas, so I can actually measure how far the permissions go, right? Because I want to be able to tell if something slipped through the cracks, and you know, as you can see, there is no ability to configure collection and registration and collection. It's always good to assign it to yourself. So in the case of RBAC, you'd want to select over here to the top right, and it would say persona, or it would say default persona, vice versa. The one thing I failed to mention just now was that you need to create these personas under persona. And I'm pretty sure that's kind of a given, but here I actually created one. It's already pre-configured for the service test, the one you guys were just looking at. And we're going to cover some pretty cool stuff like that. Definitely is going to help out. Yeah, so this is the persona. And if you have a user group, right, and it's a deny all user group for terminated users, it's not going to apply to that user's personas. So you're going to want to take away all the personas from a termed user and then put them in the deny all group. Or depending on your retention policy, you might want to delete it. But I know if you have to abide by like cybersecurity frameworks, sometimes you can't do that.
So I've got a user account of a person on the service desk that goes into a user group. That user group then is associated with the persona, which kind of links the user in their group to that set of permissions that have the content set. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, personas are kind of like a bucket as well, and they collect things like user groups and permissions to link them together.
Yeah, exactly. If whatever the user inherited, like basic default persona, yeah. So to get into that persona, this is going to be the service desk default persona right here. They're going to see this is a part of that reporting content that I was talking about a moment ago, and so is this. You're going to need to give them at least limited access to this, so they can see the single endpoint view. And single endpoint view is actually, it took me a long time to understand exactly what that was called, but it's literally right here within the URL, as it are many things in Tanium.
All right, so to recap so far, we've got a content set that has custom sensor and package in it, tailored to a help desk use case. And then that's been assigned to a persona that gives them permissions to see those things as well as in the interface. Take us in now and show us how did you do those sensors to get them in and the package to get them into that custom content set?
Okay, so there's a few ways you can do it. But if you're going to make your own sensor like we did, you're going to want to go to the administration and then under content, click sensors. And then when you want to make a new sensor, you would just simply just hit new sensor, right? And there's a few different options that it gives you. Like by default, it's going to say VB script, but you have the option of PowerShell, Python, WMI query. Essentially, what you would do is you would just, let's use PowerShell, and then to get this into the content set you were saying, you would just go up here to content set, scroll all the way down to service desk, and there you go. So now that that's in their content set, they have access to that sensor. Depending on how the RBAC is configured, you can actually give them access to make a saved question based on the sensor, or just simply use it or ask a dynamic question under it.
The short here is when we go in to create a new sensor, it's got a place to put the content set, and packages are the same way, right? So
Yep.
Let's pop over on the left then to packages and take a look there as well.
Okay. So by under packages, it's one of my favorite parts of Tanium. You have the content set, right? Display name content set in the command. So for the service desk, you can dial in on that if you wanted to, or I could just switch to the persona over here. And I could show you what's actually in their persona. So this is all they have access to out of the 210 in this instance that I have access to. They only have, I made these are custom and cloned. There's 6 of them, right? And if you look here, it only has the deploy action button. You can get rid of that button and you can just do it based on the single endpoint view, but that is also another thing that's left to the professionals at Tanium for RBAC, but it is possible. So if you go here, right, you'll see under my permissions, I can hit clone, move content set, deploy action. I can even hit edit, right? I have new package. They don't have any of that. RBAC for the service desk is you want to, by the frameworks, you want to limit the permissions to what's only needed, right? So give them what they need to learn, but also only what they need. So I made a browser extension one. That's something that when I was a new Tanium customer, I mean, it was like it was hard to figure out because we had a lot of different users, and we were coming into Tanium, which is like this professionally design endpoint management system that's like no joke, no games, work compliant. What I did was I customized it, and as you can see here, I made 2 packages. One that you can just do by the extension ID. The other one you can ask a question. The Tanium native sensor that'll get the extensions from the current extensions from your environment, and it'll pass those parameters, that extension ID, into a package and deploy it to a single endpoint for the service desk. And as you can see, there's other apps in there too. I can go over them individually. Ashley, got any questions?
Yeah, I think that's a good segue to say, hey, we've got a advanced content course that'll teach you how to do all those tricks he just mentioned, because those are not so intro, but go take that course because it's super helpful and it's going to help you because, anytime you've got that kind of access to run scripts at scale, it's kind of like a chainsaw. You can cut your leg off or you can, sculpt a beautiful creation with it. So you got to be really careful. So that's why we really encourage everybody to take that custom content class.
Yes, please take the custom content class. Do not take my word as somebody who is certified to teach custom content or passing parameters or whatnot. This is simply just to show you what you can and can't do and how to best and most efficiently automate your environment.
All right, so we've looked at sensors and packages. When we create a new one, there's a content set option. And we saw on the menu bar, we can move sensors into other content sets, but you got to be really careful when you're moving sensors between contents or packages between content sets. You only want to do the ones you've built. You don't want to move things that are coming out of the box because they'll get moved back in the next update. So that's another thing you want to keep an eye out for in that custom content class. All right, so let's go next to single endpoint view. We've got all these permissions defined now. Take us from the admin side. How do I build that special view that's going to give the help desk everything they need with that custom content?
Sure. Okay, so let's go back to, that's going to bring us back to the interact module, but we're going to have to go into our administrator persona because we don't have access to that collection and registration. We can't modify TDS, which is something that Should only be limited to administrators.
All right, so pause
So,
it there, right there for a second. So you went to the interact menu as an administrator, interact module, top right corner. There's a gear there, right? Top right corner, we got now. There's the gear. Now we're in settings for interact, and
I'll do it again.
there.
Yeah. So for interact right here, so you want to go back to your regular administrator persona, and then you can go to the interact module. These gears are where you're going to find the settings and for things like collection and interact and TDS.
And what that means is Tanium data service. So I can collect, go ahead, let's hit the gear. And what we're going to see in here is that we can tell it to go grab certain sensors throughout the day so we can have offline cache data that goes into our reports that the help desk is going to, the service desk will see in their special view.
So do you remember that sensor that we were actually just looking at in the beginning of the video? The location?
Location, yeah.
Yeah. So if you're going to put a sensor on the single endpoint view, it needs to be enabled in registration and collection. And you can see it right here, endpoint location. For the sake of this, probably should just leave it alone just so we get accurate data on that single endpoint viewer and it doesn't mess it up. But yeah,
Yeah,
any of these,
you've already added that one in, right?
yeah,
Just so people
yeah.
know. Yeah.
Yeah, but in other instances, like if you had comply or whatnot, so yeah, you want to make sure it's enabled in here. If it's enabled in here, you're going to be able to add it to that endpoint view. So we see that location is enabled. Where's it at here? Oh, I'm sorry. Location, endpoint location. Okay, so we're good to go there. So as long as it's enabled here, we can go back to that single endpoint view. Okay, so now that this sensor is enabled in TDS, the one that we had made earlier, so we're gonna want to put that in the single endpoint view for the service desk now, because that's our custom organizational sensor, right? It's going to tell them where the endpoint is or the location. So we're going to duplicate that tab again. Then we're going to go to interact. We're going to go to the single endpoint view up here. You can just honestly type the beginning of the letter of the endpoint for the computer name. Mine is jump.training.com. So here's my endpoint. This is the tab we made. You want to click that, hit edit, and then under edit, you're going to want to hit the pencil next to the title of it, and that's where you're going to find the tab's content set. So as you can see, it's in the service desk content set. That's correct. It's where it's supposed to be.
So that's also available when you first create that little pane in the single endpoint view there, and kind of why we're here, right? Help desk wants to see certain things relative to the endpoints and their custom line of business applications and uniqueness to their environment. So you're tweaking their experience. Mm-hmm. We've put that panel into a content set that only shows up when the help desk logs in. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of clever. So now we've got our custom sensor for location there. And, again, this is where you would go back and look and say, okay, what are the top 10 pieces of information that I need to close a ticket faster when I'm looking at endpoints in my environment, right?
Mm-hmm. Or if you know the public IP address of your sites, you can use Tanium native sensors to actually put the address in here, where it says Florida. I've been able to put the entire address, the floor, everything based on if it can see an SSID. It gets pretty cool. It can get pretty advanced, but I mean, you can really pinpoint exactly where something is.
We're just really hitting the high spots here today. There's a whole episode on single endpoint view that you'll want to go watch. It shows you how to build these. And so what we're talking about today is specifically a single endpoint view tailored to a business group, mm-hmm. so that you can help them do their job faster. So Matthew, you've walked us through now configuring all the permissions, the custom content, setting up a custom view for the service desk. Why don't you take us in now and show us what does that help desk experience look like?
Yeah, so what is the help desk experience? So we're going to go ahead and swap into that persona. I'm filling in, helping out the service desk. As I should. We're going to go to single endpoint view. Let's see, we'll pick one of these endpoints. Let's say it's the DC or the my machine having the problem, right? We'll go in here, So this is what the service desk is going to see. They're going to see um, the overview. That is, administrators are going to see that too. Management, this is going to be patching, so applicability. I added this in earlier for connected devices. This shows what devices are connected to it. And that location, again, that's that sensor that we built earlier. There's a package that we have, right, that would define this, right? So the DC one, for example, wouldn't have that on there. So let's go there. Under state, this should populate as nothing. So we have a package for that to define that location. And you can automate these packages again under scheduled actions based on the public IP address. Let's see here, organizational information. We're going to go ahead and deploy this package, and that's going to provide the registry value for the Florida to appear under that tab in the single endpoint view.
And these examples that we're using are really just made up and contrived for purposes of demonstration, right? These are going to be sensors and packages that mean something to you and closing those top 10 tickets. We've
tagged the endpoint with the organizational information. You can do deployments based on that information as well. Computer groups. So any endpoints in Florida, for example, you could make a computer group for that based on that sensor. There's also the ability to configure tabs based on like hardware failures and stuff like that. But this is generally what it looks like, right? This information right here can be filled in. A package needs to be turned on. Depends on what kind of environment you have. They're going to see the uptime. So it looks like it just restarted recently. So it's probably compliant with whatever patch policies we've got going on. Here's the domain. So training.com. Okay. So the location data isn't populating yet because the cache data hasn't come into TDS. It takes some time when it's a new sensor. So we're going to go back over to the deploy action button, and we're going to look at the packages that are available for the service desk persona. So there's that Chrome extension. This allows you to input the extension ID. That's a parameterized one. This is a sensor sourced one. I'm sorry, not that one. There's a sensor sourced one. It's not going to be available here because you have to ask a question. There's the one that will allow us to install Zoom or Adobe. This is effectively just a cloned add tag Tanium native package, and I've just added the drop-down menu as the variable instead of the text input. That's pretty simple to do. So because sometimes the tags can also provide device exclusions or restriction exclusions, and we don't want to do that. So, and then the organizational information, that was the one that provided that Florida location. And then update endpoint drivers. Here, organizational wireless profile. What this is going to do is it's going to put that, it's going to add the Wi-Fi profile for the org that has all the SSIDs and the keys in it. It's going to push that to the endpoint so it auto connects and sets it as #1 priority. That's something that's also like, it's not enforced, and it's because it's organizationally specific. Some of these things are really hard to configure into a GPO. So Tanium gives you the freedom to do effectively anything you want via the command line.
Matthew, this is fantastic. I love it that we're ending right here where, okay, we've got a tailored service desk experience with packages that you as the admin have designed, knowing your environment, knowing the requirements of your environment, so that they have the delegated authority now to deploy those in the moment to fix tickets faster. This is fantastic. So we've walked through really start to finish a content set to hold the custom package and sensors that are unique to our environment. We assign those to a persona, a role that which then goes to a persona, which has the user group, which has the user, a lot of things all buttoned together there. Go watch that RBAC episode, right? And now we've got this nice customized example for how you as a new customer can take Tanium, and it's an extensible platform by design. And that's one of the biggest things about Tanium that I've loved from the beginning. And a lot of people don't talk enough about it, I think, because this is the real power of taking it and applying it to your environment so you can do anything you want with it. So as we wrap up here, Matthew, thank you for this demo. Any just closing thoughts that you'd like to share with new Tanium admins?
I've been in IT since I was probably around 12 years old. I remember when it was Millennium. I remember, I just the crazy stuff as kids, like we'd create and do and develop. And I can tell you that this is probably the only thing in my career that I can't get tired of, because it challenges me to think. And it's like every day, every time I'm in Tanium, I feel like I've gotten a little bit more, I don't want to say smarter, but I thought outside the box a little bit more, to the point to where anything is possible. It's literally anything you can think of. It's not, can Tanium do it? It's okay, how can we make this happen? I've never run into an issue that I can't solve with Tanium, honestly, just because it's just so powerful.
Well, Matthew, thank you for coming on the show today to give us some of these examples as the word from the street, the customer level view. And it was great running into you at Converge. Hope to see you again
Yeah.
this year coming up. Yep. And so for those of you who are watching, come meet us at Converge. And if you'd like to be on the show, show us what you've done with Tanium. I'd love to feature that so that other people can learn from what you've learned as a new customer in Tanium as well. So that wraps up today's episode of Tanium Tech Talks. Until next time, go Tanium.